You're listening to Inside Content, the TV industry podcast. This show is brought to you by 3Vision, a global TV industry consultancy specialising in content acquisition, strategy, research and business development. Each episode, we give you VIP access to the views and experiences of senior TV executives and discuss the latest TV industry trends and insights. In this episode, Jack Davison, EVP at 3Vision, is joined by Andreas Hjertø, Regional Manager at Prime Video Nordics. They explore Prime Video strategy in one of Europe's most advanced streaming markets. Andreas shares insights into how the platform is balancing global content with local originals, the growing role of creators and influencers in reaching younger audiences, and the importance of innovation in deal structures and production models. They also discuss the strategic value of sports content for acquisition and retention, as well as broader industry trends shaping the future of streaming in the region.
Hello and welcome to Inside Content. I'm Jack Davison, I'm EVP from 3Vision, and today I have the great pleasure of being joined by Andreas. I'm going to try and get Andreas' surname correct, but I apologise if it's wrong. Andreas Hjertø. In fact, I got that wrong, Andreas, I apologise. But thankfully, I'm going to informally refer to you as Andreas throughout. Andreas is Regional Manager in the Nordics for Prime Video. I'm not even going to try and talk about Andreas' role, because I think the best thing to do is for me to say hi and ask Andreas to sort of set the scene and introduce himself and tell our listeners what he does.
Yeah, my name is Andreas. I am originally a director, producer. I used to run a couple of production companies. I was a couple of years with Viaplay in the Nordics as well. And then now I sit as a regional manager for Prime Video in the Nordics, which means that I focus on getting the best local content and partnerships to our service and to grow the service so that we can be a leading streaming service in the Nordics, basically. So that's my role.
That's great. And I think it's great that you're really well placed to have this discussion, because you've been at Viaplay, kind of one of the kind of what I would have always called the local champions for years, but obviously recently had its challenges. And I guess maybe for I think Prime's had a sort of different history in the Nordics, really, kind of coming later to the market. Perhaps it'd be worth just reiterate. I know for some it may be obvious, but reiterating a bit about kind of what your proposition is, how it shapes up in the region, kind of as a subscription kind of video services, kind of just what are the components, like how it kind of you mentioned kind of local partnerships, but also kind of obviously Prime takes a broad approach normally. Is that kind of true in the Nordics?
Yeah, it's true. We have all of the global originals that we, the Reachers, the Boys, Lord of the Rings, that kind of stuff, which is, it really works fantastically well in the Nordics. We're very prone to global and US originals. And then we have a lot of the acquire and locally produced titles. So we have like LOL, and we do a lot of scripted titles, series and stuff like that. We have a movie cooperation with Nordic Film, which distributes a lot of the local movies. So we have a lot of local movies from Norway, Sweden, Denmark. And then we have the vast library and catalog from MGM, obviously. And then recently we acquired sports in Sweden and Denmark. So we have sports in two other 4 countries. And then we also have channels proposition and TV proposition in Sweden and Finland. We don't have that in the other countries. And then we have Prime, like Amazon SE, where you can order batteries and what we're usually known for, which we only have available in Sweden. So it's a bit of a mixed bag in every country, but mainly, obviously, we have a lot of different content in the 4 countries.
Yeah, and that's I think kind of I get involved a little bit in the Nordics every now and then. That's the bit I'm always having to remind myself that kind of you have a presence with the Prime this probably wasn't the way to call it, Prime sort of shipping business and Prime e-commerce business in Sweden, but not in all the markets. So kind of, and the fact that you've described a kind of proposition that's familiar to me in the UK as a Prime user, because it has the similar pillars, but in the Nordics, I guess, do you feel that like the late start and the kind of the fact that you're not an e-commerce provider everywhere, does that make any difference or to what you're doing with the proposition, or is it pretty similar?
I think the proposition is pretty similar. From my point of view, I focus on the SVOD proposition and the content, and I want to acquire and produce the content that are, most acquisitive for the local audience. So that being the same in Sweden as it is in Norway. Like, we would never do where you can buy a battery and get a streaming a series at the same time kind of thing. So it's pretty independent. Obviously, there are differences in customer behaviors, and you can see like streamers going to shoppers and shoppers going to streamers in Sweden that we can't see in the other countries. But in terms of content, it's pretty similar, except from sports, which we only have now in Sweden and Denmark.
Right. And I know your focus is content, but I noticed, I think, did I see at the start of the year, kind of, I think, there's probably others, but I know Alente kind of added Prime Video to the bundle, and there's those similar kind of SVOD challenges and efforts that people are working on, that the same for you in your market, that kind of you're trying to find different ways to bundle and offer the service.
Yeah, and that is a super important part of the streaming environment in the Nordics. Like, bundling is a part of the total offer, and I see it more as a means to distribution. Is reaching those customers that have those subscriptions already and want to subscribe to Prime Video through their already existing providers. So we've done a couple of deals, and we are a very partner-driven company as well. Like, we partner with local streamers, we partner with local distributors. We have a deal with SVT in Sweden, one with TV2 in Norway. We have a Nordic film deal. We did a deal with Viaplay, sub-licensing EPL and scripted contents. We do a lot of partnerships on different level, either as a distribution or content or sharing windows and all that stuff. So yeah, it's been super important for us coming late to do all of that stuff at the same time. So we've been firing everywhere, but yeah, it is important to crack down a very, very mature market.
Yeah, I mean nearly all of the things you just mentioned are sort of all on a list of kind of key themes and challenges that streamers have sort of been trying to deal with over 2024. I mean, if I just think about some of them, I think that your sports has been a really fascinating year in streaming, because some people have almost changed their mind about it. I think kind of Netflix in the US has sort of almost changed their mind about it. Others have just kind of got a bit more involved, and there's a sort of long and kind of locally fragmented list of activity from Amazon with sport. I mean, I'd had a quick look and I just saw kind of really extensive, much more extensive than I thought, actually. I mean, you're very present in the UK, obviously, with Premier League and Champions League, but I noticed you sort of I didn't realize you had Wimbledon in Germany and Austria, Roland Garros and League One in France, and sort of there's a long kind of different list. And you took the Premier League football games from Viaplay in the Nordics. I think even more interestingly, a lot of people didn't spot Disney took kind of some of the football rights in Denmark and Sweden, I think. So, and it just, I guess I'm interested to know your thoughts on whether this is I guess you've been a bit more kind of active anyway, but do you think there's going to be more sports coming to the streamers? I mean, and sort of the second bit of that question is kind of, what sort of role does sport play? Do you think it plays a different role in particular? Kind of people talk a lot about kind of customer acquisition with sport, but just interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, like me coming from Viaplay as well, obviously a super sports provider in the Nordics. I see the value of sports in the streaming environment, and yes, it's not a guaranteed acquisition, but it's pretty much guaranteed. Like, you know what you're buying when you buy sports. It's not like when you buy a series where, it can go fantastically well and it cannot go fantastically well. If you buy EPL, you'll have Manchester United games, you have Arsenal games, that really resonates locally. So in that sense, it's a safer investment because you know what you're going to get. I also like one of the reasons we bought EPL is that I like that kind of weekly engagement. Like you have those weekly games every week where people come back. So it's both a acquisition player, but it's also a retention player where you get customer behavior coming back every week for a new game. So it's both in my view, but definitely acquisitions, sure, safe acquisitions basically. And in terms of like moving forward, I don't think we're not necessarily a sports service. I don't think if you're a super hardcore sports fan, the thing you think about first is Prime Video. But I do think it's a super important part of our total, content proposition to the customers, basically. So we'll definitely look at sports going forward as well.
Yeah, it's interesting talking about this now and listening to you. I was sort of thinking that there's a lot of discussion in 24 about sports and kind of what the changes meant and whether people would continue to be sort of quite pragmatic and opportunistic about what they did with sport kind of in the US because of all the complications about the rights and negotiation, and how much it would play a role in streams. But in a way, I think, again, kind of the Nordics is almost ahead of the curve here because the way you were anyway with kind of almost with streaming because of Viaplay doing so much sport before and becoming a kind of streaming first quicker. Like, I think kind of it's almost like the streamers have jumped on board the sports a bit more before already in your market. I don't know, just
and also there's been a lot of right sharing as well,
right.
Like between the different local linears, between TV3 and other like Viaplay, and other streaming services. Like, so sharing of rights is also pretty normal, and that's what we're doing with EPL with Viaplay. We have one match a week; they have the rest. So I think that's a good way of acquiring content as well, not necessarily having everything, but having a piece of it.
Yeah, that's interesting too, and that answers sort of some of the other questions that maybe we'll get onto in terms of people being kind of financially kind of much more pragmatic and cautious and trying to find ways to kind of share and window and do things like that. But the other theme, and one of the reasons I wanted to raise this actually, because I actually had a really good chat with one of your colleagues, well, sort of your equivalents over in the UK, Hannah Blythe, who runs the UK kind of content team. I can't remember exact title, but I chatted with her at MIT London on a panel discussion there, and it was really interesting. And one of the things we talked about there was kind of the creator economy and influencers, and kind of and obviously that's been that's picking up in terms. Well, I'm not picking up as a topic. It's always been a big thing, and it's a much more focus on it, both in terms of kind of the traditional media and content owners publishing on social media, but then also in terms of creators making that move into mainstream media, whether that be the Sidemen on Netflix or your own Beast Games or and shows like that. And I guess how's that in the Nordics? Are you seeing kind of shows and talent kind of crossing over in the Nordics? Not just with you, but just generally. I'm not familiar with what's going on.
It's been very important for the Nordics as well. We see a lot of content creators move between the different platforms, going from YouTube to streaming to TikTok and back, and getting that kind of flywheel of content working. And we will continue to invest in it. We are doing Amalie in Denmark. We're doing Girls of Oslo. We're following Ingebrigtsen, which is a couple of brothers in Norway. And we're soon to launch Girls of Stockholm, Girls of Copenhagen. So we have a lot of those titles where you take creators from TikTok and different platforms and then create this environment around them. So yeah, it is important, and it's super important for us. it is an appeal to the younger audiences that we see, and some of those audiences can also be less loyal. So it's also this retention game where you don't want to just have a big thing and then nothing else. You have to consistently deliver to engage that audience as well. And that is a taller ask than with older demos that are more prone to stream over time, basically. So yeah, super interesting, helps raise the profile and brand affinity in the region, but yeah, it's also raises some challenging questions.
Yeah, I'm going to really follow it with kind of interest this year, because I mean, I'm glad I'm not kind of at the coalface in terms of kind of making the decisions on the programming and stuff like that, because there are so many kind of potential influences, but obviously there will be so many that will fail and that won't translate. And I guess it's getting that right, isn't it? And finding the right ones and making them work.
And I also think I think the content itself needs, like, some people just think that you can just take an influencer and put it on TV and then everything will go well, but you need that content that really engages people, right? And obviously, if people go over from a TikTok to a streaming service, they anticipate that the content will be slightly different. So you have to, raise the bar in terms of what you actually deliver as well. I think that's a super important part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think history is littered with people who have tried to just easily just flip something from, I don't know, short form YouTube onto the main screen, and they failed. So it's not a simple thing. You're absolutely right. Okay, let's maybe move on to I guess the kind of the more downbeat theme of last year, last couple of years, which is kind of the austerity, I guess, facing the industry, but not to be morose and just be downbeat. I mean, we've seen kind of lots of different activity driven by kind of financial pragmatism. We mentioned windowing, but also kind of budgets have gone down. People are trying to make things cheaper. People are trying to partner kind of in different ways, and there's been a lot of restraint by some services, quite notably, I feel, by Max, by HBO Max, and by Warner generally, who are in your territory. But originals kind of are still key. From some of the people I've chatted to in the Nordics, kind of the previous period has been pretty brutal on some of the kind of local production businesses, and I mean, obviously HBO cancelled kind of all their local production, Viaplay slashed their kind of productions, Seymour's kind of rebrand to TV4 Play led to them kind of reducing their kind of free TV output, and what was an industry that really did ride the kind of the peak TV kind of growth and bubble in the Nordics, and was producing kind of, amazingly good quality and high volumes of kind of programming, has now going to be put under loads and loads of pressure. And we've had, just like over here, kind of companies folding or companies kind of downsizing, but generally, kind of, I'm going to ask you the really hard question, but generally, kind of the sense is that people feel the outlook is improving, and even though budgets are under pressure, and even though perhaps kind of the kind of not power, but the activity or the strength, maybe even in larger companies, do you feel that it's kind of the outlook might be improving? I mean, you can answer that kind of more simply, because I hate that question, but also then kind of originals is still kind of the pillars of your strategy. So you're active, you're in the market, and you're still kind of looking for projects.
Yeah, listen, I think it's important to recognize that it was super difficult 2 years ago. It was kind of a perfect storm in the Nordics when Viaplay crumbled at the same time that HBO didn't invest that much, and the local services, they had to cut back on both people and investment. So that was a super difficult period of time. But I also think it's important to mention that during that period we had Troll, that is the most viewed international movie ever on Netflix. That is a Norwegian original. Like, we had Las Palmas, wasn't that last year, that they launched from Norway? That is like top 10 international series ever launched on Netflix. We have, there now I can see that The Box is a unscripted format that developed, that travels everywhere, sold everywhere. So there's a lot of positive momentum, and then obviously people are shifting around and investing more now. Max are investing more, Viaplay is back. You're not back 100%, but they're still investing. And I think that the Nordics is a place that is really it's prone to innovation. Basically, we like to think differently. We challenge the establishment. We like to have fun. We have we quit working at 5 o'clock to go skiing or whatever, and we have a fairly good safety net, which is if we fail, which is kind of everything you look for in innovation. And I think we should continue to focus on that. And I see a lot of positive momentum in that development. So from our point of view, we'll continue to support the Nordic creative community, continue to invest locally. And then I am certain that we'll continue to see those innovative projects that are able to travel basically all over the world. So I'm quite optimistic, even though I do recognize that it was quite challenging a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be, don't you? You have to be optimistic, but that's great. And I guess some of the things that we've had sort of talked about a lot, kind of last year and at the start of this year, is the need. I mean, I think kind of innovation is absolutely critical in the wider sense of the term, but it seems that kind of there needs to be a lot of innovation in the commercial structuring and the partnership of deals and the creation of deals, and I guess you yourselves have got that even more kind of levers, not necessarily simple levers, but levers in the fact that you're part of Prime and there are different markets and different things you can do. And but are you that innovation stretches to how you're putting projects together and how you partner with people and who takes what and you do things differently?
Yeah, I am a firm believer that there are more value to a series or movie than just being locked into one service. We do that a lot with movies that has a theatrical release, and then you have a TVOD ST release, and then we have several SVOD windows, and then library and all that stuff. And I think that's going to be a key part of financing going forward. Doing those deals, we have that. We're doing that with SVT, TV2. We just greenlit a new scripted series in Norway together with TV2, where we share a window. And you'll continue to see that happening all over the board, and you'll also see a lot of our original titles appearing on local streaming services and linear channels. So I think that's a very important part of the media and the entertainment industry going forward. So absolutely, and that's interesting, really interesting to hear, because kind of we part of our services, we track the kind of what the US studios, where they're all going, all the shows are going, and kind of the uptick in activity last year was pretty significant, particularly actually from kind of local free TV kind of BVOD services. So in your market, kind of the likes of SVT Play, kind of BBC over here, ITV over here, kind of CBC in Canada, a lot more activity, them taking kind of second windows on their kind of digital services. So I think we'll see. And then it's the monetization piece, right? Like ads, launching a lot of services, like differentiating offers in terms of differentiating your content, premium, non-premium. You've seen that kind of how many streams you can have at the same time, offering 4K quality and Dolby sound. But there's a lot of different monetization issues as well that's interesting. That's going to be evolved, I think, going forward. Yeah.
And you mentioned kind of the thing that we've found quite interesting also is, and we get a bit of a mixed kind of response on this, and I think maybe maybe because the Nordics was a bit of a trailblazer, it's slightly different. But obviously there's a lot of focus on European kind of, I'll say, non-English language TV series that have over the years, partly thanks to Netflix, but just also partly thanks to kind of spending money and making great content, that have kind of grown globally in terms of their audience. Kind of, I think the biggest benchmark, isn't it? It was in America, where kind of historically would have resisted any form of kind of non-English language kind of TV series. And I'm not saying they're becoming kind of a successful on massive networks and so on, but they have had a lot of success, and I think that's a big sign. And when you're putting your projects together, kind of that kind of Nordics market for Nordics language programming, that's kind of, do you feel there's a sort of a robust, I'm not sure robust is the right word, there's value there, and that's still there, and it's still important?
Yeah, for the Nordic content creators, I do see that is important. Like, we can export our Nordic originals to other countries, and we see value either from us selling them or from putting them on Prime Video in different countries, basically. So both of those things are super interesting. And also conversely, we do have a lot of success with we're lucky enough to have, German, Spanish, Italian originals being created, like Indian, Japan, South Korea content that we keep on producing, that we also avail here in the Nordics, which continue to perform. And we're seeing a lot of, on the really positive side, we're seeing a lot of YA content performing really strong from other countries. So the titles like Max and Hall and Colpa Mia, Max and Hall being Germany, Colpa Mia being Spanish, that's really performing in the Nordics. And one interesting fact is that we saw that these titles, they perform even stronger with English dubs in the Nordics. So Nordic people watching a German content with English dubs is performing really strong. So that kind of things is super interesting going forward, and we'll definitely lean into international original, as we call them.
I think that's really interesting. I think there's probably a kind of a social study there on that generation, actually, isn't there? Because I've had someone else say that to me before, that kind of, it's almost, I think this isn't my area, but it's almost like connection of sort of globalization through kind of social media being a kind of global thing, and the way people talk and interact, and that the youth kind of are much more accepting of that. And if so, I think that's wonderful. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's positive for the future. Like, the way it looks at now, they're much more internationalized than like my generation was, and they're much more accepting of like German, Spanish, French originals and that kind of stuff. And the TikTok environment and the Instagrams and the Snapchat is global, right? So, so we kind of live in that global environment much more than my generation, basically.
Yeah,
that's positive.
Maybe there is hope for the world. I don't know.
There is hope for the
world. That's great. Let's. We're kind of running up to time, but let's. This is always my preferred question to end with. What have you got coming up that you're excited about? What's kind of, what are you working on, even if it's short or long term? What's coming?
I am excited about our YA strategy, to say that, maybe a boring answer, but like, we have Girls of Stockholm coming up, we have Girls of Copenhagen coming up in Denmark, and then we have a lot of local and global content for that younger generation, both global and international and local. So I think that mix of content will be super interesting, how we can kind of keep engaging and getting more of that young audience. So that's like something I'm really passionate about and something I'm looking forward to. And then obviously we have a lot of scripted series coming. We have, Title Waka, we have Fortress in the Name of Love, we have Brindan the Snake Killer. We have all of these content like series coming, and they all have different structures in terms of where they avail, how long they're exclusive, not exclusive, share them with different windows, with different local broadcasters, linear transmission, not linear transmissions, and all that stuff. And just learning more about that environment and how we can best serve the total customers of the Nordics with our local content is something that I'm really, really looking forward to. So yeah, that's, and then obviously a lot of global originals. You can't have a proper service without the Hollywood hits. So looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, that's great. It's a whole nother kind of discussion, but I'm fascinated by the activity you'll be up to, kind of, as you said, I think you said, how best to serve the total customers in the Nordics, like how best to win there, because kind of over the last sort of 5 years, we've seen lots of different kind of exercises, whether that be kind of someone giving season 1 just on another service just before season 2, and if they can live together and not kind of cannibalize each other, and all of those. I think that's because of the new kind of effort to share more and to monetize better. And I think people are going to be learning a lot, aren't they? And so that's going to be really interesting to follow.
Yeah, I saw this interesting survey where they saw that the streaming industry hasn't been on the cost of the existing the existing environment. It's been accretive to, so it's been additional to what's already existing. So, and it gives the creators a lot of different avenues. So I think, there's a lot of opportunities going forward, and yeah, I'm excited about that.
That's brilliant. I think that's a great note to end on, Andreas. Thank you so much for your time, and let's call it a day.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Inside Content, the TV industry podcast brought to you by 3Vision. With decades of TV industry experience and real-world success, we know the ins and outs of the market like nobody else. To learn more about our TV consultancy services, head to 3vision.tv.